Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chakshuji, for giving me the opportunity to speak. The last time my parliamentary record was talked about was when I was kicked off a committee for lack of attendance. So I'm hoping that a positive performance here evens the score somewhat. When I joined Parliament, I thought about my journey, my parliamentary journey. It started somewhat like this. I went to Oxford to do an interview. And in Oxford, the procedure is a bit strange because the people who are interviewing you often have nothing to do with what you're interviewing for. So he was a professor of Russian literature, and he said, in your UCAS form, you've got a personal statement. And he said, you said you like reading. That's very interesting. What do you like reading? And I thought, I must say something really fancy. So I said, I like reading literary criticism. I had no idea what it meant. So he said, wow, that's interesting. Who's your favorite literary critic? And I said, Henry David Thoreau, because I just finished reading On Walden Pond. And he looked at me a bit suspiciously, and he said, but you know, Henry David Thoreau wasn't a literary critic. And I looked out of the window at my future going up in flames, and I said, Professor, his entire life was an act of literary criticism. And then he looked at me squarely, and he said, Mr. Gandhi, you're either going to be a great man one day, and he paused, or you're going to be a spectacular bullshitter your whole life. The year after that, I went to Oxford. I got into LSE. I went to Oxford and I said, Professor, how do I go forward from here now that I know it's the latter? He said, I think you should find a place in the Indian Parliament. So here I am. You know, on a serious note, I don't know what PRS has asked me to speak on, but I've just noted down a few points as to, you know, my views on my 7 years in Parliament. And it's been a bit of a mixed bag, really. You know, because when I joined Parliament, I realized that there hadn't been a single Parliament without a member of my family in it from 1952 onwards. And so, not just my political journey, but all through my life, in some sense, Parliament has been a part of me. And my mother has won elections. I think she's won 8 of them. She's lost elections. And I remember, you know, how grueling the procedure is to get to Parliament. And therefore, when we enter Parliament, the question is, are we really trained to be parliamentarians? Are we trained? Are we skilled? Are we retooled enough for the challenges of being not just a parochial representative of a constituency somewhere, but are we, you know, in the Burkean sense, are we really parliamentarians who respond to the challenges of the country as a whole? And the truth is, I don't think we are. Parliament, when you look at the historicity of the Indian parliamentary evolution, you'll find that the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges before our parliamentary forefathers, was the challenge of representation, of being representative enough. And I think that we've taken this very seriously and responded to it adequately and positively. But I think that what we have done is we've obsessed about this, and we've turned Parliament from an arena of excellence, which it should be and which it is in parts of the world, into an arena of politicization and politics at its highest and sometimes most divisive level. So the challenge is really whether one can be representative, which one has to be and should be, and be active. You know, when I hear, for instance, we have 0 hour, and sometimes I'll ask questions. The last time I intervened was on bonded labor. And I remember the guy sitting next to me was a young MP from UP. He said, why on earth do you ask these bizarre, interventions? You're never going to get any votes out of all this. So, and when I listen to other people's interventions, 95% of them are, there was a trader that was shot in this bazaar in my constituency. Can you dissolve the UP government and put president's rule there? I mean, they're all the same. So I'm often amazed by this. The thing is that, I often think that, let's say I had a particular interest. Let's say I had an interest in labor reform, right, when I joined Parliament. Not my path of excellence on that particular policy trajectory. I wouldn't, right? Could I perhaps get put on the Labour Committee? Maybe. As Dr. Tharoor says, party is king. I often ask my mother, I said, you are one of the most well-known environmentalists / animal rights activists in India. How come nobody ever makes you environment minister? Or, minister in charge of animal rights? Or when you're in opposition, chairman of that committee? I don't have an answer to that question. I was in the Defense Committee last time. I was an MP. And I was very excited about it. And I thought that maybe an ex-military man or somebody with some serious intel or experience would head the committee. It was interestingly headed by Satpal Maharaj, not so much in the military intel department. When I was reading about the death penalty for an article I wrote, I came across a name, and the name was Professor Shibban Lal Saxena. And in the Constituent Assembly debates, I thought, what an interesting guy. Who is he? And I found that he was an independent MP from Maharajganj in 1952. Now, it's very, very difficult to become an independent MP in 1952, much less a Kayast from Maharajganj. So today, nobody from that community can probably even fight a ward membership over there. So there was a time in India where excellence was rewarded. But we've come a long way since then, right? So to just follow the trajectory without passing any judgment, Maulana Azad's constituency, which was represented in 1952, Rampur, then came to be represented by Jaya Pradaji. And Pandit Nehru's constituency was represented by Atiq Ahmed, who had the distinction of having, I think, 60 or 70 murder cases on him. But I just found it, so without passing judgment, the point is the way in which we've evolved. Is it more representative? Is it, I don't know, these are questions that haunt me. The point is that it is a cage of identity politics that we're trapped in. And we're trapped in it tighter and tighter as time goes on. And as a young person, it disturbs me. Because when I go to my constituency, the truth is nobody is interested in a member of parliament as a policy framework person, as a framer of policy, as anybody who's got anything to say on a bill that they've worked on or proposed or been part of. I mean, let's look at America, for instance, right? You've got somebody like Bernie Sanders who's captured the imagination of a lot of young people in America. And why has he done that? Because he's got a consistent voting record that is progressive and liberal and interesting. India has gone in 100 or 150 years from medievalism to postmodernism, right? And this is reflected in Parliament most of all. Not in the medieval MPs and the postmodern MPs, but in the way that perhaps we've gone from medievalism to postmodernism without bothering to create a civilization in between. And I think it is that gulf, it is that gap that is really the most challenging fact for us. As I said, why can't we, how do we look at ourselves as a country, as leaders? Do we look at ourselves as part of the collective, or do we look at ourselves as individuals? I'm sad to say that this politics of being representative has made almost all of us look at ourselves as part of a collective, forwards, backward, religion, region, caste. An MP can actually stand for something, where he can go out, have a serious voting record that can be judged, and really, be knocked on that or be celebrated on that. But when we go to our constituency, what do people want from us? People don't want to know. I mean, if I give a speech like this to my workers or constituents, and say that this is the policy legislation that I have in mind, they will all probably nod off to sleep. And they will say to me कि ये सब तो ठीक है, लेकिन ये नाली बना दो, ये सड़क 2 किलोमीटर की बना दो, ये खड़ंजा लगा दो, and that will be the end of that. The truth is that, without sounding disparaging, have our people reached that evolutionary level above starvation, above hunger, above agrarian distress, above a marginal existence, where they really care about these things? The truth is that they haven't. I donated my entire parliamentary salary to farmers who've committed suicide in UP, and I've been going from district to district, and what we do, I just want to take 1 minute of your time because I consider it quite valuable. So I'm going to Allahabad next month, the end of this month. So what I do is, not only do I give, say, 5 lakhs or 6 lakhs from my own money, we collect the elite from that particular area, and let's say they want me to come and have a picture with them, or they want me to go and have a cup of tea at their place. I say, I'm happy to do so, but this is the data of 30 more farmers or 50 more farmers who will certainly commit suicide because of indebtedness in the next year or so. So how can you help them? And so then people say, okay, we'll give 50,000, we'll give 1 lakh, and we have collected from Muradabad. I gave 5 lakhs, we collected 17 lakhs more, and we were able to help 28 families. The truth is that ultimately, I wanted to talk about this in Parliament in this session, to ask more MPs to join in, make it bipartisan, make it a movement. I didn't even get an opportunity to talk about it. And the thing is, when you go to the Business Advisory Committee, right, which I'm not a member of, most of the stuff that comes out of it in terms of topics to be discussed, because it has to be fully, consensus-based, is boring, generic, repetitive stuff that every time we discuss, so it's like we're just self-congratulatory, amplified versions of ourselves, right? So every session will have one debate on Japanese encephalitis. I've been an MP for 7 years. Every single session has had a speech. Everybody will listen, and then 2 or 3 people will speak. The point is, I've never ever heard anybody from the health ministry address it. I've never seen the health minister be there. I've never heard any policy analyst be there, right? And so ultimately, what has happened about Japanese encephalitis? Yes, it is a pandemic. Yes, it needs to be addressed. But every parliament session, in the same way, with the same people, 4% have been discussed in Parliament, right? And how many private member bills have been passed? 14 have been passed since 1970, right? So ultimately, what is the key? The key is, when parliamentarians are not incentivized for excellence, they will not excel. They will not be serious policy people. They will not do their homework, because they know that that doesn't sell with the electorate, and nobody rewards you for being a good parliamentarian, quote unquote, right? But more importantly, the institution of Parliament and its internal processes do not incentivize you to actually come forth and excel in that manner. Uh, so my point is that, and the thing is that when we have parliamentary standing committees, right, most of them, frankly, that I've been a part of, haven't really done much. But there are parliamentary standing committees that have put forth interesting ideas. I came across one which was the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Personnel, Public Grievances, Law and Justice, which has just suddenly sought to encourage simultaneous elections to the Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabhas, and also put forth a tribal judicial system for the Northeast in conjunction with traditions over there. But my point is that these are islands of excellence. They are not the norm, right? So the fact is that while we have to congratulate the media, because in shining light on these institutions, they have given them somewhat of a second wind, the fact is that, views need to be translated into action, and that hasn't happened. Lastly, I just want to say that, the process of a normal common MP getting his voice heard in Parliament on an issue of his choice. I wanted to speak on one issue this time, and that issue was medical debt. In this country, 30 million people go into poverty every year because of medical debt. And I had done some homework on this, I'd written a couple of articles on this, and I wanted to speak on it. And I went to the concerned people about 4 times, and each time I was told, I'm sorry, today we're debating the agrarian crisis for the 99th time, and we're debating, demands for grants and this, that, the other. But the fact is that how much liberty and independence do I really have to put forth my voice? I have very little within the party system. I have even less within the parliamentary framework. Just 2 things I want to lastly say. One is, there's a principal-agent conflict, right? Parliament is the agent and the people of India are the principal. But in any society, the agent has to serve the principal. But in this field, what we see is we see agents using the power of the principal to actually benefit themselves. And that is the conflict before us. Because the only time that I really see a lot of people excited is when we talk about an increase in MP local area development scheme funds, or increase in salary, or increase in holidays, or what have you. But the fact is, when we're talking about the most vulnerable sections of society, I don't really see that kind of spark, that kind of excitement that I saw in the Constituent Assembly debates, in those debates of 52, 57, 62, etc. And those were the debates where we really saw personalities coming to the fore. Now it's almost like we are not leading people, we're not dreaming big for the people, we're just pandering, right? Pandering to the mob, pandering to the collective, pandering to our constituents. I mean, how many people have the guts really to go to their constituents and say, listen, do this, it's going to be good for you, it's going to be good for your children, it's going to help them open their mind. Not a lot of people, to be honest. As Burke said, he said that, we're not a Congress of ambassadors from different and hostile interests, and we can't just act as agents and advocates against other agents and advocates. We have to stand not just as members of a constituency, a party, a local prejudice, but we have to stand as a member of the union. And as I stand before you today, I can say to you that 99% of what I've taken up in Parliament, it may not have been a lot, but it's not concerned with Sultanpur, it's concerned with the Union of India and my dreams for her. Thank you.